Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to do this week. We are going to cover chapter 10 this week. So last week we discussed about chapter 9 and I mentioned how important chapter 9 is to you guys. Chapter 9 is about the short-run production and short-run costs. We briefly talked about long-run costs at the end of this chapter, but again, as I mentioned it before, the focus of our class is on short-run because short-run is critical to businesses. If they do not survive in the short run, they are not going to see the long run, which is more stable. So the decision making in the short run is super duper important to firms and businesses. That's why we are going to basically discuss and focus on short run. If you have any question about chapter 9, please let me know. Make sure you understand the graphs, the definitions. We had different formulas in chapter 9. Of course, you can have all the formulas when you are taking the final exam, but just make sure how to use them, as I always tell you guys. But again, if there's any problem, any issue, just let me know. Do not just move on from one topic if you do not understand it, because you're going to need it in future chapters, okay? So the chapter 10 is about perfect competition that we also had it in chapter 3 when we talked about demand and supply. So we briefly talked about the characteristics of perfect competition. In this chapter, however, we're going to learn more about perfect competition. And more importantly, we will see how businesses basically maximize their profit, which is the goal of any firm, any business, right? In this market in the short run. So we're not going to talk about long run. If you are an econ major, you will learn more about long run in your more probably advanced microeconomic classes, but not here. So we are just going to be focused on short run, as I said. So we will see basically how businesses perform, how they are able to maximize their profit in the short run in perfect competition. But if you look at the lecture notes, you will see that we start with basically introducing 3 other markets we have in microeconomics, because we are going to talk about these markets in future chapters, okay? So we have 4 different markets in microeconomics. The first one obviously is perfect competition. The other one is called monopolistic competition. The other one is oligopoly. And last one is monopoly. We are going to talk about profit maximization in these chapters, especially we're focused on perfect competition and monopoly. In chapter 10, we're going to focus on perfect competition only. In chapter 12, we're focused on the monopoly. And in chapter 13, we're going to take a look at briefly on monopolistic competition and oligopoly. And that is the last chapter that we are going to discuss in this class, okay? So, what is the difference between all these markets? I'm going to just be very fast. So in perfect competition, we have a huge market, as we also discussed this in chapter 3. We have tons of buyers, tons of sellers. Getting into this market is super duper easy. If you make money, you stay in business. Otherwise, you can just liquidate your asset and just leave. It's so easy. The products we have in this market are very, very similar. Most of the agricultural products belong to this market. So the buyers typically go for the cheapest product in the market. They really don't have any loyalty to any specific brand. We're not talking about branding in perfect competition. And then we're as I said, we have a very kind of big market that the businesses can basically get into easily and leave the market easily. In monopolistic competition, in terms of size, we're talking about a big market, but it is not as big as perfect competition or pure competition. In perfect competition, businesses and also the buyers, they are not in charge of controlling the price. They do not have any impact on the price. We call them, they're all price takers. They have to accept the price in the market. All the buyers, all the sellers, as we saw in chapter 3, can impact the price, but one buyer, one seller cannot. In monopolistic competition, however, businesses and firms have more control over the price, because we're not talking about similar products anymore. We have differentiated product, and actually businesses try a lot to build brands in this market. So anything that is related to branding belong to this market. Businesses tons of money building brands. Okay, so when we talk about Nike, when we talk about shoes, dresses, retail, basically, we're talking about monopolistic competition. Getting into this market is a little bit harder compared to a pure competition, but it's still doable. Okay. Oligopoly market, in terms of, that's the third market. Compared to monopolistic competition and pure competition, it is a smaller. We have few number of firms. They have more control over the price. So in this market, we have automobiles, cars, we have oil companies, they belong to oligopoly market. We have cell phone companies, we have steel, we have farm implements, they all belong to oligopoly market. We have two different types of oligopoly. We have oligopoly with similar products, and we have a differentiated products. We're not getting into detail of these two markets, just know that we have two different types for oligopoly. But again, the size is smaller. As a result, getting into this market compared to the two previous markets, that definitely is harder. And businesses have more control, firms have more control over the price, and they still compete with each other. But again, in oligopoly, remember that we also have oil companies. So we kind of have like a cartel kind of situation going on in oligopoly. So they are competing firms with each other, but at the same time, they kind of have some sort of agreement on price somehow, which is kind of hidden from the buyers, okay? I'm sorry, that was my phone. The last market is a monopoly, pure monopoly, which is kind of super tiny in terms of the size. We will talk, of course, more about monopoly in the next chapter, chapter 12. We're skipping chapter 11. So we typically have 1 to 2 firms only. If you're talking about pure monopoly, we have 1, but typically when we talk about monopoly, we have between 2 to 3 firms in real world. Okay, so cable companies, they belong to monopoly. Local utilities, they are a monopoly. Getting into monopoly is almost impossible because of the structure of the market, because of the huge initial cost to start a business in monopoly. It is kind of controlled by government regulated. That's another reason you cannot get into this market. You have unique products in monopoly market. They are not similar. Not everybody can produce the products that you see in a monopoly. That's why getting into this market is impossible. And definitely our firms have 100% control over the price, okay? So these are the 4 markets we have in general in microeconomics. So you need to know the characteristics of these markets, the examples of these markets, the size of these markets, if the businesses have control over the price in these markets or not. So read the characteristics. They are important, and you will get questions on the final exam, okay, as you will see also for the homework. So as I mentioned, the focus of this chapter, however, is on pure competition and how businesses operate in short run in this market, and more importantly, how they are able to maximize their profit. I also have separate videos on D12 on this topic, so definitely look at them. So we're going to start with talking about the demand in this market, and you will see that the demand, and I have again separate video on this part, but remember that there is a difference between market demand and a single firm in this market, the demand for one single firm. The market demand is similar to what we had in chapter 3. If you remember in chapter 3, because of law of demand, we had a downward slope demand, right? So it's the same thing here. The market demand is downward slope, right? But if you look at one firm's demand, one single firm in this huge market, you will see that we have a perfectly elastic demand. Going back to chapter 6, I told you we're going to need the demand, supply, and also previous chapter to understand in these chapters. As you can see, they are all connected. So we have, instead of having a downward slope demand for one firm, actually we have a different kind of situation for our demand. And you will see that the demand for one firm, however, is perfectly elastic, okay? It is horizontal, okay? So that's a main topic, and we're going to come back to this demand and this characteristic of basically perfectly elastic demand for one firm in the future when we talk about profit maximization. Okay, we will also talk about different terminologies in this chapter, like total revenue, marginal revenue, average revenue. We talked about marginal values in previous chapters, but we're introducing another marginal kind of value here, marginal revenue. So it's the extra revenue that one firm basically can make from one more unit of output. That's the additional or the extra revenue. Total revenue is basically how much money a company is making. So if you multiply the price by the quantity, you can get the total revenue. We have a formula for marginal revenue. I just gave you the definition, but you need to know that. Again, you can have the formulas ready. It is the change in total revenue divided by change in quantity. Again, something that you need to know. And another important concept we have is the average revenue. We also had average cost in previous chapter, in chapter 9. Again, average means per unit, right? So average revenue is revenue per unit of output, okay? Take a look at the formulas. When you look into perfect competition, there's one important thing that we realize in perfect competition in the short run, and you will see in perfect competition that your marginal revenue is the same as your average revenue, and it's the same as the price. And remember that the price for all the businesses is fixed, because all the firms in this market are price takers. So price is given. No matter how much you produce, your price is fixed because you are accepting the price from the market. You do not have any control as one single firm over the price. So it doesn't matter if you're producing 1 unit of output or 1 million unit of output, your price is going to be fixed in the market because you are getting the price from the market. So market is dictating the price, okay? So your price is given, but we have a kind of unique situation in perfect competition. Your price is also the same as your marginal revenue, the extra revenue you are making, and is also equal to your revenue per unit of output, your average revenue. That's a very important equality, and you need to know. And it's just unique to pure competition. It is not true for monopoly or monopolistic competition or oligopoly. This is the only thing that we see in perfect competition. And it's because of that price taker kind of characteristic of this market. We need to understand this total revenue, marginal revenue, because when we talk about profit is because we are trying to figure out how businesses maximize their profit in this market. That is the goal that we are going to follow in this market. To calculate profit, you need to calculate total revenue. You need to calculate total cost. We had it in previous chapter. Total revenue minus total cost will give you the profit, okay? But to see basically how a firm can maximize the profit, businesses should make very important decisions. They do not have any control over the price because they are price takers, right? But they should be very smart with how much output they are going to produce. So we cannot find basically price in the market because we follow the price in the market, but as a business owner, we can figure out how much quantity we should produce that can guarantee the maximum profit for us, right? As business owner, we're looking for money. Our money is profit, right? So to make sure we're producing the maximum profit, we have to make sure we are producing the right amount of output, or we are choosing the optimal quantity for our business, okay? To figure that out, we need to kind of go backwards and see how we can maximize our profit. There are two different approaches, as you will see in this market and also in future chapters, that we can find this maximum profit or the maximum money that I'm talking about. The first one is called total revenue and total cost analysis. And it's where you calculate total minus total, that you calculate the total revenue minus total cost. And then you look into for different quantities, and then you look basically which quantity is giving you the highest profit or maximum profit. That's a very kind of standard way and probably the simplest way that you can calculate the total that you can calculate the profit and find the maximum profit. So the first one is total revenue and total cost analysis. You calculate total revenue, which is price times quantity. You calculate your total cost. We had total cost in previous chapter. You can add total fixed cost and total variable cost, or you can multiply your average total cost times quantity. If I'm talking too fast, pause, go back to chapter 9, look at the formulas we had. And that is your total cost. Then total cost minus, total revenue minus total cost will give you the profit. For different quantities that you produce, you can have different profits, right? So when you look at the example we have in the lecture notes, you will see that we calculate profit for every single quantity that we produce. Then we look at the profits, okay? And then we'll see, okay, which quantity is giving me the maximum profit. That is the quantity that I should pick. That is the amount of output I should pick that can guarantee I am making a lot of money. That is my maximum profit. So that's one way of finding that optimal quantity, okay? Calculate your profit for different quantities and then pick the highest profit, okay? Another approach, which probably is not that straightforward, is called marginal revenue, marginal cost approach. For this one, you should calculate your marginal revenue. Obviously, that's the extra revenue that you make when you produce one more unit of output. And then you are going to calculate the marginal cost. We define marginal cost, of course, again, in chapter 1. We learned how to calculate marginal cost in chapter 1, we defined it. And then in chapter 9, we learned how to calculate marginal cost. So for the second approach, marginal revenue, marginal cost, you're going to calculate marginal revenue, your marginal cost, and then wherever the marginal revenue is kind of equal or very similar to marginal cost, when you have this equality between marginal revenue and marginal cost, that's the place where your profit is maximum, okay? So again, if you look at the lecture notes, we have a table where we calculate marginal revenue, marginal cost, and then whenever you see this equality between marginal revenue and marginal cost, that's the place that your profit is maximum. And remember, we're trying to figure out how much you should produce. You are looking for your optimal quantity as well here. So whenever you find your maximum profit, look into the quantity that is giving you the maximum profit. That's the quantity you should produce, and that's how much money you are going to make. If you look at the example we have, doesn't matter if you choose the total revenue, total cost approach or the marginal revenue and marginal cost approach, you should get the same result. You should get the same number for your profit, same quantity at the end. You should pick. That will be your optimal quantity. So both approaches will give you the same result. If it makes sense, if you follow the notes, and if you watch the video that I recorded when I'm talking over the notes, here in this video, I'm just trying to highlight the important parts of this chapter. But to understand what I'm talking about, you should definitely have the notes in front of you, or definitely I recommend you guys to watch the video that I recorded where I talk over the notes. That makes better sense. I feel like if you do not have the notes in front of you, you do not know what I'm talking about. So please, please, please take a look at the notes. It make better sense what I'm talking about here, okay? And one more thing, I mentioned marginal revenue, marginal cost, calculate. I said calculate marginal revenue, marginal cost. But honestly, you do not really need to calculate the marginal cost. Remember, in this chapter, in perfect competition, your marginal revenue is always equal to your price. So if the question is giving you information about the price, you don't have to calculate marginal revenue because your marginal revenue is the same as price. So just copy that, okay? So your margin, there's no calculation for marginal revenue, honestly. It's just calculating your marginal cost here, because your marginal revenue is always equal to your marginal revenue is always equal to your price. Another important thing that you need to know, which is related to marginal revenue, marginal cost. Again, I did a separate video. I kind of have a handout on it. explaining it a little bit better in another video, is the shutdown case. So I'm not going to talk about it here. Just watch that video. Again, I highly recommend you guys, if you didn't watch, I know those videos where I talk over the notes are long, but I highly recommend you guys to watch them at least for chapter 9, chapter 10, because these two chapters are very important. You will get lots of questions on these two chapters on the final exam, okay? So even if you didn't watch any of the previous videos of mine where I talk over the notes, I know they're long, sometimes we're bored or whatever, watch them for 9 and 10. They are very important, okay? So shutdown case is another thing that I want you to pay attention. You will get questioned also on shutdown case on the final, okay? That's pretty much it. Complete the homework we have from this chapter. Definitely take notes when you are studying for chapter 9 and 10. Make sure you know how to use the formulas, guys. You will have the formulas, but sometimes you can just rearrange the formulas to figure out something. That's what I mean by using the formulas. Make sure you know how to use them. So sometimes you have to play a little bit with formulas to make them work with the question. And again, try to have some practice. Take a look at the handouts that I provided for you on D12. And let me know if you have any question. All right. I cannot emphasize how important chapter 9 and 10 are. Let me know if you have any question. And till next time. Bye.